Hello everyone and welcome back to ASP.NET Core 1.0. My name is Steve Bishop, and in this video we're going to be talking about the repository pattern. Now, whether you realize it or not, we have a problem. And the problem is that we have lots of code in our actions that manage the data in our database. Now, this is in direct violation of the single responsibility principle. We should be trying to abstract away those business rules or the business logic or even the data access layer in this case to some other class or some other set of functions to manage that interaction with the database. So we want to abstract away the database management logic to some other class, and that class is called a repository, and thus we have the repository pattern. So let's go ahead and hop into our Visual Studio Code window and let's create one of these repositories for our database. So if we look through the code of our customer's controller, we'll find that there's a lot of code in here that references our database, even a private variable in reference to the context of our database, right? And then we have in our get customer, we're getting a customer from the database. We are getting a list of customers from the database. Here we're creating a new customer based upon data that's entered into a form, and we can see we're adding an alternate key, we're adding the customer to the database, and we're saving the changes on the database. And then like down here, oh, look at this, look at the update customer one. We have to go and get the original customer from it, then modify all the values, and then save those changes to the database. So there's a lot of database work here, including what we've done on the delete customer. And if you're not caught up on this, if you watched the last video and you did not complete the assignment of finishing off the delete customer part, I highly recommend that you do that at this point. The code that you see here is in the work files. So if you can go into the work files and modify your own code to match that, or make some sort of adjustment to that code to match whatever your scenario is in your application, you're going to want to do that at this point because you're really going to find it difficult to move on past this. So again, I've got a lot of references to my database. Even here in my delete customer, I'm getting the customer from the database, then I'm going to remove it from the dim customer DB set, and then I'm saving those changes to the database. So there's a lot of calls and references to the database here. And what should be really concerning to you is the possibility that either A, we might change databases. So we might go away from a, like the AdventureWorks context. And maybe we go away from the AdventureWorks database and move on to some other database. Or what if your boss comes to you and says, we're not using a database at all? We're going to use a service. We're going to use a web API. Well, then all of this code that's in here, all these business rules and business logic and data access logic, I should say, that's in here is all bad. And you're going to have to go in here and fix this. And this is really not a good situation. You shouldn't have to do that. You should be able to just swap out a couple of things and make it all work. And that's the ideal, right? Obviously it doesn't always work out that way, but that's the ideal. And we can kind of get ourselves a lot closer to that ideal if we use a repository pattern. So to get started, I'm going to create a new folder under our Contoso RTM project. I'm going to call this folder repositories. And this is the folder that's going to contain all of the repositories in reference to our database. And potentially any services that we might refer back to, what have you. Now, in this repositories folder, I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to call this class, for right now, I'm going to call this customers repository. Now, this customers repository is going to interact with the database, the AdventureWorks database, okay? So it's going to need to have an instance of that AdventureWorks database context in order for it to work. So I'm actually going to remove it entirely out of the controller because ideally the controller should not need that context in any way. it should be reliant upon the repository to handle all of the requests back and forth to the database. So I'm going to go ahead and add that reference to the AdventureWorks context as a private variable on the repository for right now. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Control period so that we can bring in that Contoso RTM entities for a using statement. And it doesn't seem to like DB. Oh, I've got it in the wrong spot here. I've got it in the namespace. Sorry. It should actually be inside the class, not the namespace. Okay, so we've got our AdventureWorks context DB inside there. We've removed it from out of the controller. Now, the different actions that need to be on this repository mimic the same things that we needed to have in our controller. Those were the Crud actions. Again, remember, that's create, read, update, and delete. You've probably gotten real sick of hearing that Crud acronym by now, but it's helpful to remember. So we have a Crud interface that we need to create in our repository. We need to create the create action, the read action, the update action, and the delete action, or functions, I guess I should be saying, not actions. So to do this, I'm going to go ahead and create first a public, and this is going to be our create action, or create function that we're going to start out with. Now, once I create this new customer, I'm going to want to return back an instance of that customer so that the controller can use it. So I'm going to say public dim customer, and I'm going to say this function should be just called create customer. Now it's going to need an instance of that new customer, right? It's going to need a dim customer that is going to contain the values of that new customer. And now what I can do is I can just go back here to my customer's controller and look for the create customer method here. And I'm going to go ahead and keep the is valid check inside of our create customer method, but I'm going to take this new customer and all the way down to the save changes, what's actually happening here on the database. And maybe I want to actually do it just this part here where we're adding it to the database there and saving the changes. I'm going to take that and I'm going to move it inside of this create customer action here. Now, luckily I've named it new customer here, so that matches this parameter here. And now what I need to do is return that new customer. So now the new customer is going to come in here as a parameter. It's going to be added to the dim customer DB set. Then it's going to be all this changes are going to be saved to the database, and then we're going to return that new customer along with the new ID and everything back to the customer controller. Now instead of doing these two functions here of adding that new customer to the dim customer DB set and saving the changes, instead of doing that inside of my controller, it's now inside my repository, and now all I have to do is call the function on our repository. I'm going to do new customer repository. I'm going to call the function. Actually, I need to bring in a using first, so our IntelliSense works. Using the Contoso RTM repositories. And now my IntelliSense should work, and we could say create customer. What does the create customer method need? Well, it needs that new customer. And I can assign the value that comes back, because remember the create customer method returns a dim customer. I can just assign new customer the value that comes back from create customer. Okay, so now I've essentially just eliminated one line of code, and that code is now the responsibility of the repository. Now let's keep adding some code to this. So the next thing in our CRUD acronym was read, and we have a couple of different read functions here. One that gets a single customer based upon a key, and another one that gets a complete list of customers. So we really have two functions that we need to add to our customers repository. So we're going to do, first, let's do a public dim customer, because this one's going to return a single customer. So we'll say get customer. And what do we need in order to get the customer? Well, we can look back here at our controller. What did we need to get a customer? Well, we needed a key. So I'm just going to copy this and make it a parameter on our get customer. And I'll copy the code that we had right here and put it inside of our get customer function. And really, I don't need to assign it to this customer. I can just do a return. Right? I could just return whatever gets found from our customer key. So we don't need that anymore. And here we should probably go ahead and keep that var customer. I should put this back in. But now it's going to be the result of our new customer repository. And this time it's get customer. And the get customer method required the customer key. Right? So we've essentially replaced one line of code with another line of code. And there's something else that we're kind of doing that's repeated code, and that is we're instantiating a new instance of the repository, both inside this get customer and inside of the create customer methods. So maybe we can actually take that out, and instead of doing the DB, we can do customers repository, and we'll just call it repository, or repo actually is not too bad, equals new customers repository. And now I can get rid of the new and just say repo. That kind of shortens it up a bit, doesn't it? Now this will become important a little bit later on when we talk about dependency injection, which I've been kind of tantalizing you guys about the dependency injection, and that's actually going to be in the next video. We're going to be talking about dependency injection in the next video. But for right now, we've got a repo here, right? Customers repository called repo. And now we can continue to reuse this repo. So we've got index. Now we need to create a list. So we need some sort of function in our repository that returns a list of customers. So let's go ahead and do public dim customer get all customers. And this doesn't need any sort of parameter because it's just going to bring back a complete list. And really, you know what? I don't like that this is a I collection now that I think about it. I think I'm just going to make this a list. So I'm just going to alter this a little bit. I'm going to take it out here. I'm probably going to need to fix that in the view as well. Well, you know what? Let's just leave it for right now just so we don't create a problem. But this is really kind of a good idea to just call this a list. But it's okay. I'm fine with calling it a collection for right now. I like collections a lot. Oops, I went too far. I like iCollections a lot. They're very versatile, but lists are also very versatile. So it's really kind of up to you. Okay, so we've got an iCollection of customers, and now actually we just need to return it, don't we? So this should not be a dim customer. This should be an iCollection of dim customer. And now we just return the list. Okay, I think that looks good. Now we can change the same thing here. We had our index. Now we just return. Actually, you know what? We can just drop that all together because we're just bringing back the list. We could just do repo get all customers. Look at that. We've shortened our code even more by doing that, haven't we? Okay. So next one, we've got the create, we've got the read. Now what about the update? Well, oh boy, look at that. Okay, we got to add an update customer method on here. So we'll do public. And what do we want to return for an updated customer? Well, I'd say just another dim customer, just a single customer. We'll call this update customer. It takes a parameter of type dim customer, obviously, because it needs to know what are the values that I'm going to be changing on the original customer. And we'll say updated customer. And we'll once again just kind of take all this logic that's in here. We'll cut it out of the action. We'll paste it inside of our repository. And luckily, we've named everything the same thing, so the updated customer matches there. So the parameter here matches the parameter or the value that the variable it's already expecting. Now we do need to return. Let's just do a return of updated customer so that we can use that updated customer a little bit later on. And now we can just do something like this. We can do updated customer equals repo update customer, where we passed in the updated customer. Okay, so that's been successfully moved into the repository, and it looks like we've got create, we've got read, we've got update. Now we just need to do the delete logic. So we'll add our public. And what did we need for the delete customer? Maybe we should do some sort of like Boolean to tell whether or not the customer has been successfully deleted. So maybe we should do a public bool delete customer. Now, which customer do we want to delete? Well, we want to find out based upon the customer key, so we'll make that, oops, the same type of parameter here. Let's get all the logic that we have in here. So dim deleted customer all the way down to the save changes. We'll cut that out of the action and put it inside the repository. And I think what we'll do is we'll just say after we're done saving the changes, we'll just double check to see. We'll do a return. Actually, this could probably be outside of this, so we'll take it out of the if statement. We'll just add it here. So return, check to see if db dim customer, well, it's really essentially this right here. We're going to check to see if we can find the customer again inside the database after we've deleted it, right? So after we've deleted it, it should be gone. So we're going to say return whether or not the first or default returns null. Okay, so essentially what we're doing is we're checking inside the database, look again inside the database to see if we can find a customer with that customer key. If it equals null, then that means it's successfully gone, right? It's been deleted. If it's still there, then that means that the customer has not been successfully deleted and that should return false. It was not successful. So you guys can, there's some debate as to whether or not you want to make this a void, but I like to use a bool just to be a confirmation that something's processed properly. But now we can do this. We can do repo delete customer, and we just pass along the customer key. And we could do some sort of if statement if you want. I'm just going to leave that out for now for brevity of this video, but at least you get the idea. Now we have moved all of the logic that checks the database, right? That looks into the database and updates data, deletes data, creates new records, and gets all of our records. And we've moved that into the repository, and it's no longer the responsibility of our controller. I'd say it's time for a brief intermission. Okay, here we go. Oh, the poor kid. He completely misses it. Oh, man. And now, if we wanted to, we could add a little twist on this that's going to make it much more viable for us in the future. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to our customers repository, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to say quick actions and refactors, and I'm going to say extract interface, and I'm going to get an iCustomers repository, And I'm going to want to have these same functions: create customer, delete customer, get all customers, get customer, and update customer. I'm going to put all of these members on the interface. Okay? And now, I think it's still good. I think it just put it in the wrong spot. Yeah, it moved it there instead of in our repositories folder. Okay, so now I have an iCustomer repositories interface, and now my controller doesn't really care what kind of customer's repository I'm using, as long as that customer's repository implements iCustomer's repository. And it looks like I don't currently have that on there, so I should probably add it. iCustomer's repository. That was probably another one of the problems when it tried to extract the interface. But now my repo doesn't really care what kind of repository I'm using, just so long as it has those members, the create customer that returns a dim customer and takes a dim customer, as long as it has a delete customer function that takes a customer key and returns a bool. And same thing with my get all customers action. It needs to return an iCollection of dim customers. I might want to change that, like I said, to a list. I think that might make a bit more sense. Dim customer or get customer now takes a customer key and returns a dim customer. And the update customer method takes a dim customer and returns a customer. So I now have an interface for my repository. Okay, and because of that, I can add a different kind of customer's repository. So if I wanted to, I could make a new class that would be like a customer's service repository. And that customer's service repository could implement iCustomer's repository. And of course, it would need to implement all of those members of the interface, which I don't have a service right now that I can demonstrate this on, but you can imagine that this customer service repository class might, instead of going to a database, be going to a service, like some sort of web API or some WSDL or something like that. Not a WSDL, SVC service. So it could point to some other service or some other database or something else entirely, but as long as it implements these same methods on it, it will work with our customer's controller, right? We can use the same, because now the customer's controller doesn't really care what kind of repository it uses. I could easily just say customer's service repository. And as far as the controller is concerned, there's nothing wrong with this, right? As long as it can call those methods and call those methods and members on that repository, it doesn't really care that it's a service repository instead of a database repository. That's why we use repositories. It makes it very, very simple to just swap and replace with different repository classes wherever we need to. So that's going to do it for repositories and the repository pattern. I hope you guys got something out of that. If you did, please don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can get notifications whenever there are changes or additional videos that get posted. In the next video, I do plan on talking about dependency injection, which will kind of take some of these concepts of using interfaces and static classes and kind of take them to the next step, and you'll start to see some really cool things that you can do with the ASP.NET Core framework. So until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.